getting naked. It's about getting back to yourself. To me, an entrepreneurship is the person who takes that idea and is willing to do what it takes to birth that idea into the world. The customers are your oxygen. Your oxygen to them and their oxygen to you. It's a connected relationship. We just become more and more one as a world, not more divided against ourselves and each other. I'm not transforming into something different. It is already me. I am it. I am all that I need to be. Transformation is...
Joel, first of all, thank you for coming officially on my podcast. As I told you, I am really excited for this, and I have been looking forward to talking with you since many weeks ago. And I loved reading your book, Getting Naked, and well, that will be the topic of today's conversation. And so I want to start with an introduction. And people listening already know that I don't like usual introductions as to ask you, hey, could you introduce yourself? No, I want you to introduce yourself through a story. And the story which I would like you to tell is about how you started your first business, how you started Naked Brand Group. And through that story, tell us things about yourself.
You mean the story in Peru?
Yeah.
Specifically?
Exactly that one.
Well, I'm grateful to be here as well. And thank you for taking the time to read my book and invite me onto your podcast. We did play some telephone tag and some back and forth getting this one set up. So I am a believer in getting out and seeing the world and experiencing new things and trying to get off the track that you expect for your life. Mm-hmm. And I believe that if you can do that, the world will open itself up to you and all kinds of ideas and opportunities will land on you. Some you'll take, some you won't take. And it takes a certain measure of openness to be, able to go down that road. And so for me, I had, I'd been an elite runner and my running had come to an end. And so I was sort of lost. And something that lost people do is travel. You don't have to be lost to travel. But the irony is that floating around the world is the antidote to feeling lost. And so my brother and I did this, but we had a little bit of a purpose, and that was we were going to try and make a film. And so we saved up and we bought this video camera and we went all the way from Mexico to Santiago, Chile. We didn't finish the film as it was intended, but because we had a bit of a falling out at the end of the project, and our video camera fell off a cliff. But to wind the story back, we were in Lima, Peru, and we were at a nightclub, and this was like one of our first times ever at a nightclub. His for sure, because he was 3 years younger than me. Mine, maybe I'd been once before, and then once or twice, and so we're at this nightclub, and we realize that it's not really a nightclub. It's like part nightclub, part brothel. And my brother is thinking he's just Casanova. And we realize we got to get out of there before we get into some trouble. So we get out of this club, and we're walking the streets in this beautiful warm night in Lima, Peru, and we go to a night market. And there's all these booths. There's like chickens in some booths and appliances and other. And in one booth, there's underwear. And I needed underwear from like weeks back on this trip. Everything had like holes in it. And so I got this underwear, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this feels incredible. And for those who don't know, Peruvian Pima cotton is one of the gold standards in cotton. And it's way better than anything my mother ever bought me. So I buy a few to wear on the rest of my travels, but just intuitively and instinctually, I put a few in my bag, and I'm like, I'm keeping those for later, like packaged and everything. Don't know why I'm doing it. And then we hike up Machu Picchu a couple weeks later, and I'm not loving how the underwear is performing in this hot, humid environment. And so I start to think, well, all those fabrics I was used to as a runner, they're more technical, but they're not this soft. And like, how can I put these two things together? And so as soon as our camera fell off a cliff and him and I kind of unraveled, I got on the plane and went home, and it couldn't have been more than, I don't know, a few months. And I was already like trying to figure out how to design underwear. And, it couldn't have been much more than 6 months after that, maybe 8. I'm on national TV on a pitch competition called Dragon's Den, which is similar for your American listeners to Shark Tank.
Mm.
And I'm standing there in my underwear, pitching a business idea. I've never been a business person, never studied business, not a fashion designer, and I got absolutely torched. So to make that long story short, that's kind of how Naked got started, and it kind of sums me up in a nutshell, where I just jump into things.
Yeah,
I figure them out as I go.
I love that. And do you think, well, now recalling about those experiences, do you feel like you back then felt a calling from, this idea you had, this vision you started developing?
A calling to do underwear?
Yeah. Well, maybe more to start a business, but yeah.
I think that, I think you can be entrepreneurial in the sense that you're, maybe you trade your own stocks on the market as a retail trader, and maybe you're quite ambitious inside a corporation. You're looking to be innovative and entrepreneurial inside a corporation. And there's that type of entrepreneurship, which is absolutely entrepreneurship. You're trying to make a go of it on your own. And then there's the other type, which runs parallel to it, which is where you can't work for somebody. You have to work for yourself, for better or worse. You just aren't cut into that, that normal life, if you will. And I was that. I was a runner. I was a long distance runner. It's a solo sport, in the sense that your success is based on how hard you're willing to push yourself in a race. No one else is there to carry you across that finish line. Sometimes in other sports, you can rely on your teammates, and that's an amazing thing, but that's not the same as in running. And so it felt very similar to me, or natural to me, I guess, to go into entrepreneurship. I dropped out of university. I got fired from my only real job as a newspaper salesman, because I kept trying to, well, one, run the newspaper, but two, convince the people I was selling ads to try and invest in my underwear company. Hey, if you have enough money to own a small business, maybe you can invest 5 or 10 grand in an underwear business. And so not specifically, I didn't grow up intuitively, yes, and it made sense later on, but I didn't grow up in a household where we talked about business, where we talked about money, where you were like, my mom ran her own business and my dad was a musician. So in a sense, maybe it was always there, but I didn't know until it hit me that that's what I was going to do.
No, yeah, I do get what you mean, because I think, well, since I was like around 10 years old, I have been, well, by then I was dreaming of being an entrepreneur. And I think that sparked because of my dad, because he has been a businessman his whole life. And maybe that was what started my vision. But then learning about people like Richard Branson and the other great entrepreneurs who I admire was also empowering to start things as my podcast, for example. And yeah, I used to tell my dad that I would never get a job, that I would be my own boss. And until now, I think I have had like maybe 2 jobs, 2 informal jobs. And I don't think I am great for hiring. I think I prefer to be an entrepreneur. I like that freedom and also that uncertainty.
You like the uncertainty? You thrive on it?
Yeah, most times I do. Other times it doesn't go well, because, for example, 2 months ago, I thought I had planned which podcasts I was gonna record and post from May until July. But then I just recorded 4, and all the rest was a mess. And I got a little worried with that uncertainty of not knowing what to do and what to post. But I like that because now I know like that's part of the journey. And well, I think now it's great to bring your book into the conversation. So I have prepared a couple of things, and the first one which I wanted to talk about is about the definition of entrepreneurship. So on page 222, in paragraph 2 of your book, you say, the work of an entrepreneur is not about being rich or even happy. No, an entrepreneur is about being whole, proud of what you do and how you do it. So here I have three main questions which are related, and because of that, I will ask them right away so you can answer them however you want. And they are, so first, what is your definition of entrepreneurship and of an entrepreneur? And then, should everyone try to be an entrepreneur, or should they just stick to a path they have been put into? And finally, it is about the part of being proud. Doesn't that relate to feeling happy? If you feel proud, doesn't that also mean that you are or feel happy?
Mhm. I maybe we'll start with the last one, and then we'll see if I remember the other two.
All right, yeah.
What I say when I say it's not about being happy is it's not about the result. That's what I
Mhm.
mean. So because it's not about the result and it's not about the destination. It's about the journey, right? Of course, you want to be happy and present on that journey. But what I'm saying is that being an entrepreneur in itself isn't going to make you happy, right? Because nothing will. There's no thing that's going to make you happy. There's no material success. There's no relationship that's going to make you happy in and of itself. Your happiness comes from inside, it comes from being whole, which is the word I use.
Mm-hmm.
Being whole, how I'm using that there is being yourself, is understanding yourself. And I believe, hence the title Getting Naked, it's about getting back to yourself in this journey where there's a lot of stuff coming at you and people want you to be a certain way. And you look at people, you mentioned your idols. Of course, we all have idols, and that's really good as a sort of as a guidepost. But if we liken it to the, I think it's a Buddhist saying, might be Taoist, but like a finger pointing to the moon.
Oh,
Can't
yeah. Mm-hmm.
mistake the finger for the moon itself. The finger being the idol, being the things that we're doing to get to this destination. We're already there, right? And so uh, I view entrepreneurship as a way that we can learn about ourselves and that we can shed layers of anger and hate and jealousy and impatience um, and judgment for ourselves and for the people around us and for our circumstances. How do we shed those layers? Because they show up in our life so often when we're in a business situation and we're really angry that something didn't go our way, or we're mad at someone because they did something. The reasons that we're upset are inside of ourselves. And if we can face those things and dissolve those things, we become a better entrepreneur. We become more whole and more true to who we are. So that's what I mean when I say, the irony or the contradiction is that of course that will make you happier.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm trying to again separate destination from journey in that statement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think you asked about a definition of entrepreneurship, but there might have been one sandwiched in the middle there. What was the?
Yeah, should everyone be an entrepreneur
Oh yeah.
or try to be an entrepreneur? Mm-hmm.
You know, we as humans, I think that one of the greatest gifts that we're given, I mean, the gift of being alive, for all its hardship and for all its pain that we all have in so many ways, is to experience life in this curious way, in this curious way that always asks the question, well, what if I did this?
Mm-hmm.
And instead I think this is okay, but I think it's also false that many of us, we get on this track where we think we're secure. We think that we have, if I get a government jobs in my country are very secure. You pretty much can't get fired. You get a union job, you pretty much can't get fired, right? You have your pension, you have all these different things, predictable time off. And so you have this sense of security. That sense of security may end up manifesting that way. It may just roll out the way that you've intended it to. And that's a great thing. But everything in my life and the people around me I've seen is that that's a very false sense of security. And instead, the skill, the muscle that we need to exercise is adaptability. Is how we adapt and how we show up no matter the circumstance, no matter the unpredictability, just like you did when you talked about your podcasts, all going astray. And so I think that in that sense alone, everyone needs to practice entrepreneurship in the sense of being able to adapt and thrive in uncertainty is in part an entrepreneurial skill. Doesn't mean you have to have your own business to exercise that skill. But if we look at it more philosophically, I think it's absolutely critical. No, not everyone has to run their own business, right? Because if we look at like in a society, in a business, in a corporation, there's a role for everyone, right? And there's a role for the entrepreneur, and there's a role for the person who helps keep the entrepreneur grounded in his or her desires to always be innovating and driving forward. Somebody needs to ground that into process, into being operationally minded, into being fiscally minded and stuff like that. And so you need that balance, right? And the last question, my definition of entrepreneurship. I just think that, I think artists of all ilks, are entrepreneurs. I think that obviously business owners, small business owners, big idea visionaries, of course, they're entrepreneurs. And so I think that more of us are entrepreneurs than not. I think it's just about when an idea comes to you, bringing that idea into the world, whether that's a project inside your corporation it's your idea and you're championing, whether that's that's a painting, that's a song, that's a book, or that's a business. To me, an entrepreneurship is the person who takes that idea and is willing to do what it takes to birth that idea into the world.
Yeah, I think that, for example, in Google, they tell the workers to the employees to dedicate 20% of their time to create new things, and from that time, things as email as Gmail have come to life. And yeah, I do agree with that. It's more about bringing a vision into life. And then another thing you talk about in the book, actually, I think it's in the second chapter, about taking the leap of faith. And this was a thing which I don't know why really, but it resonated a lot with me, about taking the leap or just jumping with an idea and taking the risk. So I would like you just to get deeper into this, and explain also how, when, and why should someone take the leap with an idea, instead of either expecting it to happen or regretting that it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's always the point. I find it less now, but certainly when I was younger, and many of my friends and colleagues, they would have these great ideas, and they would just not do anything with them. They just, I need to finish school, I need to save money, I need to put a down payment for the house, all very practical things. And I've seen later on in their life, many of them actually start acting on some ideas that they have. So it's interesting for me to think about how the security gave them the confidence to explore their ideas a little bit further than, and maybe if I think about it, they just had more patience than me, and they just had a better plan than me. But again, it's a muscle. that we get to work, this idea of taking the leap. And it's not about just trusting ourselves that we can do it. It's about trusting that the universe will catch us. That, or if it leads us down a bad path, there's an opportunity there, or there's another door, right? We have to trust this greater thing, and that's faith, right? That's faith. We're putting our belief in something that's not tangible necessarily, and it's a big part of taking the leap. It's saying, I don't know exactly where I'm going to land, but I know that where I land is going to be exactly the right place. And I liken this to like many people when they're dating. Yeah, right? I mean, when you approach a girl you like or a boy you like the first time, and you ask them to like you back, eventually for them to love you. And that starts with just asking them out, of course, right? You're taking a leap, right? And you get the butterflies in your stomach that say, hey, this is uncharted territory. And it might not be the first person that you ask that to, that the relationships works out, but you might learn something from that relationship that you take to a new one. And David Dido always talks about this, when there's this edge, that if we live on this edge, and that edge is like just this level of uncertainty that's exhilarating, that's empowering, that is filled with opportunity. We can create this amazing life that we want from living on this edge, from being that certain level of uncomfortable. But if we go too far past that ledge, we fall off the other side. So sort of an example of that is like me developing the pair of underwear, and then next thing you know, I'm on national TV pitching this idea, not knowing anything about how to pitch the financial viability of my company, not knowing anything about how to pitch a true valuation that was aligned with where the business was today and where the business could go. And therefore I was called delusional on national TV and totally roasted. So there was an example of leaping just a bit too far. But then when the episode aired, other investors saw the episode, thought, hey, that's not half bad. Maybe I'll give this kid a call. And all of a sudden, I'm caught by the universe, right? I did leap too far. And so I really believe that when we live a life where we're not afraid to take leaps, whatever that is, taking that vacation you've always wanted to take, having a child, even if you don't feel like you're financially ready in your life to have a child, but you're called to it. When you want to start a business, practicing the muscle of not being afraid to take a leap, but also exercising the muscle of what's a small enough leap that I don't leap too far, that I don't fall off the deep end. I didn't, have an idea one night and then go remortgage my house to start the business the next day, and then it fails and I lose my house. I still believe in that scenario, you're still on your right path. But the thing that we realize is if we take one small step at a time, one small leap at a time, next thing you know, we've gone farther than we ever thought we would. And I think that kind of sums up what I mean when I talk about that. Is there anything more specific you wanted me to dive into there?
No, well, maybe the idea of burning the boats, which you talk about. Yeah, about that one.
the Cortés story.
Yeah, exactly that one.
I was actually it's one of those stories where it's like, I think that this particular person committed unbelievable human rights atrocities with his voyages, but at the same time, that the message of this idea of burning the ships, I thought was quite important to share. And despite the other stuff, which made me almost not put it in the book to begin with, it was in and then it was out and then it was in. And anyway, the point is that so this Spaniard who's voyaging into the new world, he once his crew arrives at the shores, they burn the ships, signaling that there's no going back. We only go forward, right? And it's a great metaphor to being all in, because sometimes the safety nets hold us back. How many stories are there of like musicians who, I think Travis Baker just shared this on Joe Rogan's podcast not so long ago. He's just went all in, living on a couch in Santa Monica, trying to be a drummer, right? There's no option. If I have an option, I'm going to fall back onto it. So therefore I cannot give myself an option. Driving out sort of the dreamy story of driving out to Hollywood, leaving it all behind, leaving yourself no option but success. And I think it's very empowering for many to just know, right? I have to find a way. And sometimes that safety net, that thing, that crutch that we have, it just continually lives in our mind, is to say, no, you don't have to find a way. We got this. Right? Mm-hmm. And it sometimes, not all the time, it sometimes separates the ones who cross that chasm and become great and those who don't, because those were the ones who burned the ships and they said all or nothing. But that definition of burning the ships and that definition of taking the leap changes as your life goes on. Mm-hmm. As you're in different points of your life. For me now, I'm still an incredible risk taker in terms of, business and whatnot. But, when I think about, all or nothing, well, that's my marriage. That's my children. That's not my business. I burn the ships for them now, right? Hopefully I can kind of do it all together. Mm-hmm. But before, it was just me and nothing else mattered, not my relationship, even to the extent, my wife now was my girlfriend then. But my business was much more important to me, and our purpose, should be very important. But so that's anyway. That's what I think about, burning the ships, and mm-hmm. It's a fun thing to do every now and again in your life. I must admit.
Yeah, I have many thoughts on this, because I will start by telling. So I have two friends who I usually do masterminds with, and they are interested just in investments. And so an analogy we usually take for the risks we take is about cryptocurrency. So someone our age could take the risk of buying crypto, and if he or she loses all the money, then nothing much happens, because we don't depend on ourselves financially. But someone older and an adult who has a family and all that might not be able to take that risk. And I do agree. But for example, then I think of Richard Branson, who just takes risks and doesn't, seems not to care about the other stuff, except his family, because I have seen that he's like very, very, very close to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Have you heard of Tim Ferriss talks about fear setting? Have you ever heard that? I mean, fear setting is like a stoic version of what I believe it was Marcus Aurelius, but it might not have been, who talks about understanding what's the worst that can happen and getting okay with that up front, right? So when I say that, if you're a situation, to paint it really simply, if the worst thing that can happen is I go bankrupt, right? I invested too much of my money into this relationship, into this business. Mm-hmm. And the worst thing that can happen, because I guaranteed this loan and I put my house on the line, that I go bankrupt. Can you get okay with that? And if you can get okay with that, great. And I think that a lot of people have so much faith in their abilities and their skills. Because it's not about how much money you have. It's about the ability you have to make money. It's the ability you have to build businesses that matters, right? And so guys like Branson, I don't know him personally, but he has faith in his ability to make money, so he's not afraid to lose money, right? You've got some epic band music going on in the
Yeah, it's
background
so
there.
outside here in the street. um,
That's all
yeah.
good. But I'll just add one more thing to that. But I had to ask myself the question at one point. I didn't want to lose. I don't want to lose my relationship. If the worst thing that can happen is I end up not seeing my children because of my choice. At this moment in time in my life, that's not okay. And at this moment in my life, I put so much strain on my relationship. That's not okay. Now, obviously, my wife and our partners in life, so therefore we're partners in business, and we see eye to eye, and we've worked a long way to get there. But the difference is that I'm saying in a fear-setting scenario, losing my children is not an outcome I'm happy with. So I got to pull back and say, how do I adjust this so that isn't the end result, right? As best as I can. I can't control that ultimately, but
Yeah, I think it's Premeditatio Malorum or something like that, the Stoic mantra for setting fears, right? Or something like that. And from what you have just said, I also think about being resourceful versus having resources, which I think is what happens with Ransom.
yeah. And lots of people. I mean, I think we're sort of facing the most resourceful generation ever. I think your generation my generation is pretty darn resourceful. I think your generation is going to be even more resourceful. The fact that 19 and 18-year-olds are trading Bitcoin on,
Yeah.
and starting, to have portfolios just shows you there's been a shift. They're seeing the world differently. What they're seeing is that I don't trust the man. The man has not transferred the wealth to me like he should have. Therefore, I have to take these measures into my own hands. To the tune of like, now there's a whole new currency, like, or currencies in these cryptocurrencies that are, the antithesis in some ways to the American dollar, to the old way, right? Where it all nets out, I don't exactly know today. Maybe some people do, smarter than me, but what I'm seeing is a generation of very resourceful people who know how to make money.
Yeah, we are having more resources and more tools online to create stuff. Even me with my podcast, I mean, if I didn't have internet, I wouldn't be able to do what, well, maybe I wouldn't be able to do something like Richard Branson did back in his time, when he created a magazine and was talking with people. Because I mean, in his case, he had to leave school. In my case, I am not planning to leave school or anything for my stuff. I try to sort of balance both. And actually, I wanted to ask you about balance, which is something you also talk about in Getting Naked. um and well, I think I prefer the word harmony instead of balance, because I was listening to an interview to Jeff Bezos in which he said that he doesn't like to, well, doesn't seek to have life work balance. He seeks to have a life work harmony in which both his work and his personal life empower him and energize him. So how do you perceive, what's the difference that you perceive between the life work balance or the life work harmony that you had back in the days of Naked and in today, in your life today, where you have a family and also a business about traveling?
Yeah. I mean, harmony is probably the better word um,
Mhm.
than balance. I think I've heard that too. I think I've heard other entrepreneurs talk about work-life harmony. This comes down to, there's a few things to unpack here. Working hard is normal. Working hard is one thing that human beings are actually quite good at doing, and in many ways we're built to do it. And I don't just mean in business. I mean go back to running, for example. You don't become a successful runner without working very, very hard at running. Basketball, hockey, doesn't matter, soccer, football. So we have to work hard. And I don't define balance as like meaning that I get off work at 5 o'clock,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't define balance as having a routine that I never ever break, right? Uh, I define it in the ebbs and flows of life in general. So if I'm in a period of just immense creativity, I'm not in balance per se with other aspects of my life.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in the process of launching a business or launching a product inside a business, that takes a certain amount of work. Again, going back to the running example, if I'm preparing for a certain type of race, there's different periods of training. It's called periodization, where intense blocks of training, lighter blocks of training, rest, intense blocks, competition. It's all periodized, right? It's not based on what one day looks like or what one week looks like. It's a much bigger calendar. And so I see it the same way in business. Balance is knowing when it's time to rest, knowing when it's time to reflect, knowing when and that's where a lot of us get stuck, myself included. We go back to the other days. There was never rest. There was
Mm-hmm.
never not something I was willing to take a step back from. And I fall into that trap again today, right? Doing that as a runner, the feedback is very instantaneous. Injury, always injury, right? In work, it's a little bit more hidden. In our relationships, the silent killer of that separation that happens between you and your partner doesn't happen in one big work cycle, 1 year. It happens over a prolonged period of time, a continuum, where all of a sudden we wake up one day and we realize the damage that we've done to that relationship because we weren't in balance, right? So it's harder to see, and it takes more self-awareness. And this comes to the sort of the final piece of that I wanted to unpack in this, is that the balance and the harmony comes down to the inner work that we do in understanding why we are or why we're not able to turn it off, right? Like, turn off the work, achieve harmony. And the motivations that are driving an insane obsession with money or an insane obsession with success and notoriety without ever pause, without ever reflection, without ever being able to be present with anything but our work, that's not balance to me. And that's where, we have to look inside and understand what's informing that.
Mm-hmm. So balance is, instead of having things at the same level here always, it's more about like the movement there is, and the cycles.
Yeah. The
Okay.
cycles, just like nature,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just like nature, we have the seasons, and the seasons change, and a hot season means something different than a cold season, and more rain means something different. It all affects it, but it all tries to find its balance. And it's not something like, I don't believe you're in balance if you're trying to control your balance. That just becomes rigidity. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It becomes a rigid way of living. That's not balance, right? Just because you do something, just because I exercise every day and work, exercise, meditate, work, does not mean I'm in balance.
Mm-hmm.
That's my structure. That's structure, right? It's, how do I feel about the thing that I'm doing? Am I able to do it more when I need and less when I need? It's about flowing with your life
Mm-hmm.
and trusting how your life is unfolding in front of you and reacting to that. I'm tired. I'm going to rest. I'm tired. I need to push through this. Then I'm going to rest. That's balance. It's not structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what just to happen to me. So in the last 3 years mainly, or 2.5 years, each 6 months I have like big exams at school, and I through the years I have been developing my projects and all that. And after the week when I had exams ended, I got sick, and that happened each 6 months. And even before the pandemic, I went on a camping trip. Then I had also exams, and I was starting my page. I was starting the reader lounge, and many more things that my body. I felt that my body told me to stop or to pause to rest, but I didn't. And what happened was that I got sick, and I couldn't do anything about that. And in the last months, it has not happened in quarantine. I think just once, but I do get what you mean. It's more about knowing when to do certain stuff, because we cannot like keep a same level always in everything of what we do. And yeah, I like that. And actually, now talking about business and knowing when to stop, you talk about the founder's dilemma in your book, and I hadn't thought of this before I read it. I hadn't thought about the fact that most founders of a company will have to leave it in a moment, and that moment might not be what the entrepreneur wants it to be. So I would like you to talk a little bit about your experience with this, and also about knowing like when, specifically for entrepreneurs, when should they get away from the journey of the company?
Yeah. Yeah, it's always it's certainly like a dose of cold water when you've first founder's dilemma. Um, I think that even like when I started writing this book was a long time ago, and I think things are shifting in certain ways. I think, maybe in some respects, when founders leaving companies doesn't have to be isn't exactly the same as when I first, how I first thought about it. But I think the point still remains the same. Is like, um, the idea of the founder's dilemma is, in a nutshell, should I stay or should I go? Am I still
Mhm.
the right person for this, to run this company? Do I still have the same amount of passion? Am I still prepared to give it what it needs? But most importantly, is there somebody out there more, not more talented per se, but more, um, their experience lends itself to the role today,
Mhm.
and they would do a better job steering the ship. And how I was faced with that is that we had raised about $7.5 million, and I had I had in my mind, I'd be like, I'm making a lot of mistakes, and these mistakes are costly to my shareholders. It's costly to their value. And although I'm a huge believer that founders should stay and they should receive mentorship and from their from their boards of directors and outside mentors and coaches, et cetera, and guiding their businesses, and so that they keep the original spark and soul of the business. At this point, I decided in my mind that I was not the best person for the job. And we relocated the company and to New York, and I had invited this woman. I'd asked this woman named Carol Hoffman, who just was an industry legend, to take the ship. And people were very excited about this, right? It was
Mhm.
like, yeah, absolutely. From the shareholder perspective, right thing to do. um, and of course, it was the right thing to do in many respects. We had a lot of money, and we were trying to make this leap. But looking back on it, it was probably a bit too early, because what hadn't happened, we were still trying to make it. And so we were in this kind of murky place between an established entity that maybe needs a visionary, but a lot of operation, and to this company that still needed, it was still a startup. It still needed that startup juice that startup founders bring. And so I think we put ourselves in a situation where we put, it wasn't just the CEO, it was the whole management team was used to running $100 million organizations. And we weren't one. We were much smaller than that.
Mhm.
And so the expenses, the balance sheet, the financials, everything just bloated. And that nimbleness that's needed in startups, it gets lost in this big this bigger corporate mentality. And so I think I made a mistake with exactly maybe how, not the people I brought in, they were all incredible at their jobs. It just it seemed that way from, where the company landed. But I had, what we call imposter syndrome, where I just felt like I was just living a lie in so many ways. I either wasn't the right guy to run, the company that I had started and was running. And then when it got all these big wigs in and these really talented people, I felt like I wasn't good enough to be there at all, and those are tough moments for entrepreneurs because there's so much emotion that objectivity can become challenging. And that's where, again, mentorship is critical, right? Mentorship from outside and inside, faith from the shareholders to support an entrepreneur so that an entrepreneur can feel safe to execute the vision, right? Not worry, am I going to get let go by the board of directors and stuff like that? And so the should I stay or should I go is the founder's dilemma. And I think usually the answer is stay. More often than not, the answer is to stay, not to go. The flip side of that is, if you got a beautiful exit waiting for you, maybe the answer is to go. As long as your shareholders are looked after, as the company continues on, then take that money.
Yeah, because I knew about the story of PayPal and how the founders got out of PayPal by reading Elon Musk's book. And it's like very interesting to see, for example, with guys as Elon or as Richard Branson, how they have the entrepreneurial spark, the entrepreneurial energy, and they are not like business owners. They are the starters of the business. And I don't know. I am still young, obviously, and don't know much about how my journey will be. But I think I identify myself more with the people who start the business, as Richard Branson again, than the people who are now running the business, are as Tim Cook. I think is his name, the CEO of Apple.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and one thing I loved from the book was the third chapter, which is about the basic principles. It's really pretty logical, and I think pretty powerful to have a structure to take decisions and to take the leap and many more things. And you talk about establishing the why, the values, the principles, the goals of the company, and the essentials and the actions. So could you get a little deeper into this and then how to establish them? But what I am most like curious about is about the values. How are the values of a company like set? Should they be set from your personal values and can they change over time?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that the illusion in anything, I think we talked about this at the very beginning, is that we're secure. We always have to adapt and change and grow. Think about what just happened during the Black Lives Matter, when all this sort of began to really move itself to the forefront. Say last summer was about the time
Yeah,
that really came into everybody's view. And no matter how good your values were in your company, you probably were not hiring Black employees. You were probably not hiring LGBTQ employees. Companies were white. They were white, and so sure, you can have the value of like, take ownership in your work, which I have that value, but it wasn't even coming close to addressing these things. And so people didn't shift and make important changes with new information. It's like when you know better, you have to do better. And that's what happens as we go through our lives. We are always learning to do better than we did before, which is part of the reason I struggle so much with woke and cancel culture, because it's one thing to the gift that we're bringing these things to attention is a beautiful thing, that we're calling things out and saying, hey, maybe we need to look at how we did that. That's a great thing. But to say that, well, we never should have made the mistake in the first place is a very challenging thing, because we all make mistakes. We all make a lot of mistakes. We're not born woke. Well, maybe you could argue that we're born woke and then we become unwoke as we go through our adolescence and into our teenage years. But the point being is obviously that we need to have sort of compassion and understanding for the mistakes that we've made, and accept that for some of them, obviously not all of them, we can adjust. And you saw that happen with the Black Lives Matter movement, where companies did make changes, good changes, right? And we're seeing that happen with the LGBTQ communities, where people like LeBron James and Shaquille O'Neal are like starting marketing agencies entirely BIPOC LGBTQ. Like, this is great stuff. It's not caught in the past. It's saying, how do we move forward from here? How do we do better always? And so I love that. And I want, for all of us to say, it's not what you did. Again, for the most part, some stuff, certainly, but it's how do you do better? And how do you actually, don't just say it, but actually do better? Actually take action on hiring or changing your marketing and the way that you present your company in today's day and age. So so that's great to see. And we kind of dive back to the values specifically, and this idea of guiding principles is, there's one simple, like, if we just boil it down to its simplest essence, if you hire one asshole in your company, a person who is an asshole, a genuine dick, like, who talks behind people's back, who is insidious to your culture, takes no responsibility, points fingers, makes people feel bad about their mistakes, an asshole. Before you know it, you have a culture of assholes. It's not the good person that infects and is contagious. It's the bad person, right? We sink down because in some respects, it's like our survival to sink down to this, like the level of this is where this person is in the tribe, and we sink together. And so in terms of establishing really clear values, really clear principles inside your business, this is how we do business, this is how we treat people. It starts with the hiring, and it starts when you hire people who understand and are aligned with the values and principles of your company. Howard Schultz said it simply when he said, why do you have smiley people? Because I hire people who smile. I don't train them to smile, right? And it's really hard to do that because the hiring process is quite short. Anyone can put on a face. The references can be maybe friendlier than, or somebody doesn't really care, and so they're just whatever. Yeah, he was fine type thing, right? Nobody. I think people have a hard time. Many people being honest about, whether somebody was a good person to work with, or they focus on, they did their job well. Their job well. Does that mean they were a good person to work with? No, not necessarily. It doesn't, right? And so that's where the hiring process can be so hard. And so it's not about the hiring process as much, although that's critical, but it's what you do next. If that person that you just hired is not a culture fit in your company, is not aligned with the values of your company, you have to do one of two things very quickly. You either have to eject them off the bus very quickly, or you have to coach them. And you have to give them an opportunity to say, hey, have I failed you? Right? Did I fail you in putting you in the wrong position? Did I fail you in creating an environment where, I wrote the values on paper, but We don't actually live them, and therefore you felt like you didn't have to, right? So you got to check yourself, and you got to do right by that person by saying, did I fail you? And if, again, if that quickly comes to, no, you didn't, they're just an asshole, get them off the bus, right? As quickly as you can, which sucks, especially in a startup, because, well, A, it always sucks to fire people. It's just painful. And B, you're always scrambling. It's like, now I got to go find somebody else. I got to go through this process again. My business needs this. And so it's a very tough part of being an entrepreneur is that getting the team chemistry right. But when you do, it's like an orchestra playing well together, right? Everyone knows what everyone's going to do, and they trust. They have that taking the leap. They're willing to take the leap here because they trust that their person is going to take the leap there. The person who designs the product, the marketer, the person who's running social media trusts that when that product ships, it's going to be good, right? The person who's making the product trusts the marketing person is going to take beautiful pictures and represent that product beautifully. And it becomes this incredible symphony working together. And I've experienced that in my life, and not consistently, but periods of time when there was just this group of people. And it can make the smallest organization feel like the most powerful. Diamandis talks about that. Peter Diamandis talks about how, like, a small group of capable, whatever, committed people can do things that big corporations can do, and it's totally true when you get into that flow together. So that's why I'm really quite strict on having those values, but also being open that they can change. People can say, hey, this should be a value, or we should tweak this value, and I'm like, let's talk about what that looks like.
Yeah, adapting. I have a few things which I want to mention about culture and all about this, but before that, I like the story in the book where you were talking with your friend Cam about the culture in Naked and how you told him about how the people in Naked were through the story, through a story you had in Thailand. Could you tell that story?
Yeah. It's funny you bring up Cam. I've been working on a film, the same film that I was working on when I started Naked. I've finally finished it. It's a bit different now.
Oh,
but it's dedicated to Cam, and we're showing it tomorrow at a global travel conference. And so I've been seeing a lot of Cam. So it's just, he's been on my mind a lot. So Cam and I were in Thailand, and Cam, for those of you who haven't read the book, which is probably most of you, Cam was a friend, and he was an investor in Naked, and he was somebody I traveled with as a young man, and he passed away. And his passing was one of the turning points of my life for the better. Losing him is incredibly hard, but it showed me, it realigned me to harmony, not balance.
Harmony.
So we're in Thailand, and we're at the full moon party. And the full moon party is a monthly party on the island of Koh Phangan, where I don't know the exact number, but it seems like thousands of travelers come. And there's this stretch of beach, and then there's, like, all along the beach, there's bars, and then there's just the beach, and all the bars have patios and this and that. And so, the boats are just coming in, and all young people like yourself who are tasting the first bits of freedom unleash at the full moon party. And I was one of them way back when. And so I was drunk, and we were all partying together, and I got so drunk that I was like, oh crap, I need to go home. Like, this is not going to happen. And I think at one point I thought maybe I would be going home with this girl, but then she realized I was too drunk and and it was not going to happen. So I end up just kind of stumbling my way back to my hostel, which is kind of it's not like in a building hotel. It's on another beach somewhere, and it's kind of open. And so I don't even make it into my bed. I pass out in the door, in the doorway, right? I think my bug net's ripped down. Like I'm just, just beyond. And then all my friends who, are a little bit older than me, Cam was 3 years older than me, and they've lived a little bit more. They can handle their liquor a little bit better, and also know the code, the conduct of, partying with your buddies. And one of the rules was like, especially in a country like, Thailand, not to say it's a bad country, but you're just in another country, period. To let them know what the heck you're doing, right? I'm going back. I'm doing this, Not that we needed to hold each other's hands, but just kind of respect and decency.
Yeah.
Buddy disappears, not cool. So I disappeared on them. And they, they're just like, didn't realize it at first, and they kind of did. And then they kind of freaked out. And so come 6 a.m., there's a lot of passed out people on the beach. People who, like me, just like, I almost made it to my bed. They didn't even make it past the beach. And so at first light, Cam is rolling over bodies that he thinks are mine to see if they're me, to see if I've died on this beach or passed out on the beach. And obviously I'm not there. And he comes back to the hotel, and he's just livid with me, swearing at me like I wasted all this time going over bodies and what the heck and this and that. And so when I described in my book what Naked's team was like, I said Naked's team were the type of people who would have rolled over bodies at the beach. And the reason I say that is because there was 3 other guys in that crew. Cam was the only one. I think maybe one of the friend helped for a bit, but stuck around and did that, right? Mm-hmm. He soldiered on for his people, like his person here. And that, to me, was the type of people we had. People who, again, you can trust to have your back and not be competitive and not, worry about whether or not they're going to be there for you. And so that's how I use to describe our culture at Naked for this wonderful moment in time in which we had that culture.
Yeah, I really loved many stories you tell in the book. And well, some of the things which I wanted to mention were, well, first, so I think the closest experience I have had to hiring and firing somebody was in October of last year of 2020. And I invited a friend of mine to join the Reader Lounge to help me edit some stuff, some videos. And we were working for a month, and by the time I was also starting properly with my podcast. But the working relationship didn't work as I thought it would. And we had more problems than we usually have as friends. And by the time it was, sorry,
what were the problems that you guys had?
Well, for example, if you look at my interviews right now, for example, the one with Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., the video doesn't have like the black margins up and down. It's just like me and Don Miguel. And I knew he maybe did know how to do that, but I kept telling him to edit the video so it looked like that, but he told me that he couldn't do that, and problems like that, technical problems. And also in our meetings, he was just, talking about other stuff, and we didn't make much progress, and those were like the issues we had. And so then it came a time by which I thought like I should tell him I should fire him, which didn't feel great at the time. I was really sort of worried about that. But now looking back, I can see that first of all, it was like the right thing to do, and it wasn't as a big problem as I thought it was. Now we are still friends as we were back then, and there everything's fine. So yeah, that's about hiring, and I think it was not much. The issues were not much about like the work and what we produce. It was more about how we connected and the conversations we had, and mostly culture. And he was the only one in the team with me, so it didn't feel good. And yeah, so that's about like hiring and firing. And the second thing which I wanted to, well, actually read is a quote in Getting Naked, which says, "People, not products, are your most valuable asset." And I basically agree with that. People make up the company, and as you say, a small group of people can create as great things as a big organization could do. Um, and well, is there anything you would like to add to that?
It's a it's a really good point that you bring up, because like let's say, let's separate like an employee or a team member from a business partner for a second here, and let's pretend your buddy was your business partner.
Hmm.
um, you know, I have many friends. I've only successfully been business partners with one.
Hmm.
They're all still friends, but it is a very interesting thing. And this person may be the most unlikely business partner for me. It's Alex, obviously,
Hmm.
who
Alex.
is mentioned in the book. And that didn't mean that we didn't have moments where we weren't business partners in the life cycle of multiple companies, but it's not as predictable as hiring. It's not like hiring. You're not a business partner does need to fit into the realm of the company and where they fit in with their strengths versus your strengths versus the team. But you're talking more about a marriage than you are about an employee, right? You don't fire a business partner in the same way. That has massive implications potentially in terms of the ownership of the company, in terms of paying somebody out. These very big ramifications depending on the size of the company. And so you have to be able to operate with this person on a this radically transparent level, as you should with your team. But with your business partner, it almost needs to be implied, like you're on the same wavelength. And there's always this initial excitement with businesses. It's so wonderful, the feeling of those first few months of a new business. And I found it, just kind of liken it to the honeymoon. When that period's over, is only when you understand whether or not that person is going to be your business partner for you, because they're the one you're relying on. And when the rest of life comes crashing in, your life, their life, marriages, kids, goals, dreams, and all of a sudden this initial idea that takes so much, it's like raising a kid. It takes all of two people to raise a kid, or obviously for single parents, a really incredible single parent, right? But it's the same thing with a business. It takes that level when we're talking about building big businesses here, right? And so I always say, you have to choose that business partner so carefully. It's not, you know, you know, it's like, you go to a club and you see a pretty girl or boy and you want to go home with them. That's one thing, but marrying them is a different thing. And it's the same with business. It's an atrocious analogy, but it's not actually far off.
Yeah, I get what you mean, especially because I lately there are many things which I have been learning to try to improve my entrepreneurial stuff, but it feels kind of weird not to have anyone to share that journey with. And sometimes I think like, all right, I should find someone who maybe could join either the reader lounge or the podcast or whatever. But it's more difficult than what it seems to find like the right person who aligns with the values and all that. And there are companies which are started by two people or maybe more. But then if you start a company alone, that's when you should take care of who you join with, right? And because in the other scenario, you have already started with them.
Hmm. Hmm. It is, and I've also met many entrepreneurs who are just far better solo
Mhm.
solopreneurs than they are, business partners, or where you find as you go through your career as an entrepreneur, you end up in lots of different businesses. Usually, even if people only know you for one,
Mhm.
you might have your hands in plenty of pots. And so sometimes after you've been through one with somebody, you find that like maybe you're going to go this alone, but there's an arm of it you share, and it creates these interesting opportunities where with this person you're not fully business partners, but
Mhm.
you're more than just maybe shareholders or in another entity, and your talents can be split off into that. And so I've started to notice that where it's not about just fully we're in this all the way together. It's more kind of an interesting map of like, well, I'm good at this, so I'll help you and I'll invest, but it's your thing, it's not my
Mhm.
thing. We're not partners. We're in the sense that we're to the bitter end. You're responsible for its success, but I'm here to help.
Mhm.
And I found those to be quite nice
Mhm.
as well.
How does that work with a mentor? That relationship where he or she helps you, but he's not like necessarily responsible for the success of the company.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like a marriage counselor or a counselor. You know, they're just there to help. I always find that mentors, sometimes offer great business advice, but they know, any smart mentor knows that when the stakes are there, it's there's another factor that's driving your decision making. And so
Mhm.
they're just there to try and be a mirror, where they reflect back to you what you're saying, what you're thinking, and help you kind of sift through the emotionality of it, sift through how myopic you might be, how in the weeds you might be with your business, and help you kind of pull out of that. And sometimes, sure, mentors like actually say like, no, don't do that deal. I've
Mhm.
seen that deal before. But that mentor knows that you're going to do whatever the hell you want to do,
Mm.
right? They've just said it, and you needed them to say it. You needed to hear it, but you're still going to do whatever the hell you want to do. And I think the most successful people are the ones who do listen, or at least, they go back. Frick, man. Like, if I think back to so many things that mentors told me that I didn't listen to, if I'd listened to it, would have been way better. Would I have learned the lesson from the mentorship experience in and of itself? Probably. But there's a chance I had to go through it myself to
Mhm.
actually learn the lesson. But as you get older, again, that's where you do take that advice. I think in the beginning, it's kind of okay.
Mhm.
Fall on your sword a bunch of times, and it creates the character that you need. But maybe I'm
Mhm.
wrong.
No, no, no. I think of it, for example, with my parents, or me and my parents, or my sister and my parents. When they tell us not to do something or whatever, and we go to it anyways. Um, I mean, they maybe gave the advice or whatever, but still we learned from our mistake, and especially at my age and at my sister's age, where we are already kind of having some freedom. It's mostly on us, like how we act and how we go through life, because we are not like just junk kids anymore. And something I wanted to ask you is how in your journey as an entrepreneur have you connected with mentors? Because, for example, with the woman who was the CEO of Naked, I do get the point that she would become the CEO, and that was sort of mentorship relationship. But with other people, how do you connect for them to be your business mentors?
Hmm. I'll just rename or digress back a little bit. Yeah, in our psychology, it's like we learn from mistakes. So, the obvious example is, I touch a stove, I burn myself. I know not to touch a stove. If somebody else touches a stove and burns themselves, do I learn not to touch that stove? Probably you should, right? Can we learn from others? We read these books. Can we learn from others' mistakes? And there's just this part of us that's in our own biology that's like, no, I still want to learn the mistake for myself.
Yeah.
So, mentorship is again, it's a beautiful thing. It's one of those things that is in many respects changing. Different mentors come into your life for different moments of
Mhm.
your professional career and your personal life. And so I have friends who have sought out mentors, whether they're finding them on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and they've heard of somebody and they make a point to get their email address, to cold call them, to reach out and say, hey, I want you to be my mentor. That's never been me. Um, I was more, and those people, by the way, generally speaking, have been incredibly successful. So it was probably the right path. But for me, I just always was more let it come when it feels right. It's there, and an example of that was I was down in Miami on a business trip, and um, we were doing a photo shoot for Dwayne Wade's the basketball player, his collection of naked underwear, and that was the focus of my trip. And the morning we were leaving, I think we were leaving around noon, and we were having breakfast at the hotel, and one of my business associates was having a catch-up breakfast with his friend, who did happen to be a naked shareholder. I didn't know it though at the time, and I joined, and it's like, this individual is incredible. And he's now one of my dear friends. He's a fantastic author. He's a healer. He's a businessman. But I didn't know any of that then. I just
Mhm.
had this connection with this human. I was like, this person can guide me. Um, and he became a mentor. And so that's how I've in my life is I just try and I feel it. And if I feel it, I will then be deliberate about trying to make that happen. I cultivated that relationship with him from that point onward. I made a point to see him every time I went down to Miami. It went from casual drinks to, this is a friend, this is a mentor, etc. Right? Or this is a mentor, this is a friend, probably. And so that took effort over a period of time. And he's a great mentor and friend today. And that's happened a handful of times in my life. Is it enough? I don't know. I probably should have more mentors, or
Mhm.
more consistent ones, but I've just kind of just more let it happen as it happens, and then pounce on the opportunity when I see it and I feel it in my heart.
Yeah, so you trust your gut and follow through when you feel like that. I
Yeah.
love that. And going back to the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about sort of the journey of the entrepreneur, but mostly about what it is to be an entrepreneur. And an analogy you give in the book, which I would like you to talk about, is the journey of water going from the top of the mountains into the ocean. I really loved that because you also say that that's not just the journey of the entrepreneur. That's life. That's the process we all have. And so, could you talk about that?
You did your homework.
Yeah.
There is this story that I heard that story many, many years ago, and it talks about how water always for one, this is sort of an aside, water is gentle, but yet it is powerful. So to kind of liken that to the mentorship thing, right? You know, I'm not necessarily seeking one. If one comes into my life, then maybe I'll try and make it happen. But water being gentle in its nature, it's soft, it's malleable. It can power through rocks, right? It's this incredible thing when you think about not forcing things in your life, being like water, being adaptable like water.
Mm-hmm.
And so as water makes its journey from the top of the mountain in many cases, and it sort of comes up from the ground. I've actually seen this happen when I do my high mountain travels in the summer in the north of British Columbia, where you literally just sometimes see it rise out of the ground, just rise out of the ground. And then it just looks like a wet, kind of rocky, grassy field in the Alpines. And then it finds its way into a crevice, and it starts making its way down the mountain, and maybe it disappears again to pop out somewhere else. But then at the base, you see this river. And so this water's journey goes from the top of the mountain, and it works its way down. Sometimes it's raging, sometimes it's still, always flowing, but appears still. Sometimes it hits blockages, and it has to go around one way or go under or go around another way, or it rises and then it comes over,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually it makes its way to the ocean. The ocean is the water's ultimate goal, but it doesn't stop at the ocean. It appears that that's its ultimate goal, but then it evaporates into the sky and is once again rained back down onto the tops of mountains and into the earth, and it begins its journey all over again to the ocean. The obstacles that it must go through, how it must be adaptable, um, and how it's always moving forward. And so I liken that to a journey as entrepreneurs, and kind of coming back to this idea of happiness isn't the goal, the ocean isn't the goal, the
Mm-hmm.
goal's the journey. And no matter what, when we get there, we're going to repeat it again and again, so long as we're on this earth. And there's this Indian proverb that says, behind mountains, there's more mountains. And I want entrepreneurs to think about it that way. I want entrepreneurs to be present in their journeys and know that there's many, because that first idea or that main idea that you're pursuing can feel so consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing. It's becoming your purpose, but at the same time, it's not your only thing. Just like the water, it has to adapt, it has to move around, it has to do these different things to get there. And so we need to have that openness and that fluidity and that adaptability.
I just really love that analogy for in general, and especially because it includes nature. And lately I've been embracing nature more, or just going to the forest or whatever. And something I always ask in these interviews, because my podcast is called The Transformation Journey, is what's your definition and how do you approach transformation? And I want to ask you that because I think it's sort of related to the journey of the water.
Hmm. Well, if we talk about it in that sense, transformation is, the water is always the water. If we want to get like really into the metaphor here, the water is not transforming. It's
Mm-hmm.
not transforming into the ocean and transforming into the rain. Ultimately, it is just the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way that I think I'm learning about transformation in life, in my own life, I should say, is that I'm not transforming into something different. it is already me. I am it. I am all that I need to be. I am whole. But I have to, if we talk about using that word transformation, it's a process of elimination. It's a process of removal back to who we are. We aren't adding our way with all the skills that we know and learn, right? We're distilling down to our essence. And that might not be how people think about it. I'm not talking about transforming as a businessman. As a businessman or woman, yes, you have to learn skills. You have to add so that you're better at that thing. If you're a basketball player, you have to transform into a better basketball player. But as a human being, I think it's the reverse, right? I think it's actually getting back to an acceptance and love for ourselves. It's a letting go of our traumas, the things that hurt us in our life, the things that made us sad, the things that made us angry that we held onto. The things that we read and learn are all about how to not hold on to those things and how to come back to here, which is the idea of the book, Getting Naked, is getting back to this thing. And so in fact, in many ways, I'm trying less hard to transform than I used to try, right? I'm trying to be less rigid. I'm trying to be less structured. I don't have to meditate for a certain period of time every day in order to transform. I'm trying to be like, when I can, like the water, adaptable. Today I didn't meditate. That's okay. I'm adapting to the flow of this day, right? And that's because at the end of the day, we can just like dedicate ourselves to transformation, and that's great. But if that transformation takes us out of the present moment, we've missed the point, because we don't have future self. I don't have future Joel, and I don't have past Joel. I only have this moment. And sometimes the transformation can be like, well, if I do this, I'm going to be better then. And that's true. If we're talking about skills and, if I keep practicing piano, I'm going to get better then. But I don't have then again. I don't have it. It does not exist. This is what I have. And so if we get present in this moment in our journey, in our life, this idea that I need to transform dissolves, because then we look around and we see beautiful faces of our friends and our family, and we feel the wind on our skin, and we smell, maybe the air is floral or it's fresh, and we don't have the need to change any of it, right? And to me, that's the most rich we could ever be, is if we look around in this moment and enjoy it for all that it is, even if that's just 5 minutes, and then we go back to being focused on future tasks and stuff like that. And I'm not suggesting not to do that. We're humans, and we're driven by our purpose. But if we're only driven by our purpose, we miss the point, which in the book, I'm sure you remember when we talk about the false idea of legacy projects, the false idea of we can deny our own death, these immortality projects, and we're striving towards this end that we don't have, right? And so that could change. That's just where I'm at right now.
Damn. Have you read anything by Eckhart Tolle?
I've read Stillness Speaks and A New Earth and Power of Now.
Yeah, A New Earth is great. Yeah,
and Earth is great. Yeah,
I
read that on that trip. When I was in Peru.
Oh, great!
That trip,
yeah,
like way back then. Like I was like a long time ago.
No, yeah, I do love that book, and I have been able to relate much of what I learned, for example, what you just said, to that book. Well, not most of the things, but many of the things of what you talked about, I didn't really get them right now because I mean, my brain is trying to comprehend many things. And so, anyways, afterwards, I re-listen to my interviews, and I hope I get it then. um, but yeah, I think I do get your point, which is mostly about you are just water. You just are and adapt to life in the moment, as when water has to go through waterfalls, will fall or through rocks or around. Okay, I like that. And now that we're talking about these topics, in your website, you have a namaste symbol. Why is that?
That
Yeah, that one. Uh-huh.
because it's a cool tattoo, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Isn't that why I have it? I mean, it's probably on the maybe in some respects on the cornier side of things I have, but I just, I always understood it as the God in me creates the God in you. Um, I think that there's sort of a bigger cosmic meaning to the Om, the Namaste, this the realities that we live in. But for me, it just is always boiled back to that. The God in me greets the God in you. So doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what you did. I see you, right? I see your pain and my pain. I see your love in my love. I see your fear in my fear. And so I've just, as a someone who's been transformed by travel and just the goodness of people around the world, that's one way that I try and hold on to that, as a sort of remember to always hold on to that when I'm feeling judgment
Mhm.
or yeah, judgment or envy or whatever. I just try and see somebody at exactly the oneness of our oneness and our humanness together. So that's
Mhm.
what it's there for. And the website, I guess that's sort of my greeting, if you will.
Yeah, I really like this. And so you told me that you were at the New Earth when you were in Peru. So by that time, did you start learning about all these things, these spiritual things, or when was it?
Not far before that, but that there, I always fondly recall, just like when you're starting a business, when you're getting into this to spirituality, or you're getting into anything, and there's this freshness of and this excitement and this zest for the light, like, wow, it is awesome to be a human being on planet Earth and to experience these things. And you kind of feel this, like, I'm discovering things for the first time, yet those things have been like ancient traditions for
Yeah.
5,000, 15,000 years. And we've practiced, maybe eternity, probably eternity, absolutely eternity. And so I had come out of running with an injury that it forced me to look at my life, and I ended up reading just so many books. But the first book I ever read about, I would say, energy and spirituality was actually the Celestine Prophecy, which is a fictional story about uh, essentially seeing energy and our connected energy. And they're down in the Amazon somewhere, and they're trying to save
Mhm.
these ancient traditions that are in these monasteries. And it's a great book. Um, and so that kind of opened my eyes to seeing energy in a different way. I meditated and I was very into visualization as a runner, but it wasn't spiritual.
Mm.
It wasn't spiritual at all. Um, and then I just became voracious, you know, a new earth, four agreements, the monk who sold his Ferrari, um, the artist's way, Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. Like, there was just so many of these books, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And that was just like early days, like early 20s. Um, and like I said, then you get to a point where it's like, that's good. These books are beautiful teachers, beautiful reminders. But if I'm
Hmm.
so obsessed with reading this book that I'm no longer present in my life, I'm missing the point of the book. And so that's where I'm sort of coming to in these days, is a lot less self-help. Some, but a lot less, you
Hmm.
know. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I don't love from the Instagram community of books is that many accounts, I would even consider mine sometimes, make it seem that we are reading all day long and we finish a book a day and stuff. But I mean, that's not really it. I have, last month I barely, well, I was reading your book and another two books, but I didn't make much progress with them. But yeah, I do like that, to consider this stuff reminders and not necessarily like the truth or something you gotta live by, and if you don't live by that, you do not have value and you're not worthy of love, and all that. And we have almost talked for 2 hours, so I want to start asking some final questions, but I still, I really love these interviews, and especially talking about business and spirituality. And this has been great. But what I want to ask you is, so in a part of your book, you talk about clients and treating them great because they're human beings as us, and yeah, they want to thrive and have desires and all that. And something that came into my mind when I was reading that was online entrepreneurs, or people who sell courses and trainings and webinars and all that. So I think I can perceive that many of them like focus only on how much they sell and not necessarily on acknowledging that they are contacting and impacting real people, even if it's online. So how can we avoid well, I sort of consider myself as an online entrepreneur, so how can we avoid falling into this trap of just selling and not looking into the real impact and connection we are generating with the clients and with other people?
Mm, good, good question. I'm not sure I know. Yeah, I mean, I don't consider myself an online entrepreneur. I wasn't born in the internet. The internet didn't breed me, right?
Hmm.
Like it does so many people today. Um, so I don't understand it in the same way that you might.
Hmm.
I understand it as a vehicle, um, as a practical vehicle for my products. Even if myself is one of those products, but I don't think I understand it. It's nuanced the same way you might or somebody else might, right? And so I have many friends who have courses and they're quite successful with them. And from anything I've ever seen from them, they do have a great deal of care, uh, especially early on when they're able to, and then as the thing gains so much momentum, it becomes very very hard uh, to have the same level of care for
Hmm.
everyone,
Hmm.
because you're just one person and there's so many hours in the day. And so I've
Yeah.
seen them kind of go through those struggles. Um and hmm, it's a I think it just comes down to, if you think about the four agreements, and one of the agreements just being always do your best.
Hmm.
you know if you have the value that you care about your customers and you always do your best to show up for them, with customer service, with the value of your product, etc., then that's the best you can do. But you should absolutely think about it. I think that, yeah, I mean, I'm not, as I said in the book, the customers are your oxygen. Your
Hmm.
oxygen to them, and their oxygen to you. It's a connected relationship. And uh, and and so you have to honor that. You have to honor that you can put food on your table or live your private jet dream life, which is seems pretty awesome. I've never done it, but well, I shouldn't say I've never done it, but I haven't done it like those. They weren't mine jets, so um, I didn't pay the rental fee. So, I think I think, yeah, you just got to care, and you just got to do the best you can at caring, and you have to understand that it's not possible
Hmm.
to necessarily, you know, otherwise you're not going to have any time for, for anything else. I think
Hmm.
that's a pretty terrible answer to your question.
No,
Um,
it wasn't. I do like what you say, especially about caring. That's basically it. For example, I mean, I think of Amazon, of big companies as Amazon, which might focus a lot on profit, but at least they have like a good customer service, and they focus on how they treat their clients. Or Disney, big companies as those.
yeah, I mean, it's a good point. If you compare Facebook to Amazon,
Yeah, for
Amazon
sure.
is there's not even a comparison in terms of the customer service. Not even a comparison. Facebook is atrocious. They should they should be ashamed of their customer service.
Mm,
The amount of issues that myself and friends have had getting just not getting resolution in a timely manner, in a friendly manner, in a is beyond me considering how much money they have. There's no
mhm.
excuse. It's
Yeah.
inexcusable to not be as good as Amazon at it. You know,
Or even Starbucks. Have you read the book Onward by Howard Schultz? Yeah, I
I've,
mean that it's I really enjoyed that book, especially because I liked the story of Howard, of how Starbucks was not taking care of customer service and the experience, which was the main point, but then they paused. And right now, at least here, if you go to Starbucks, the experience is still good. Um,
just to riff off that for half a second because it is a good point, and you kind of brought it up earlier. Even if it's about profit, it's still what I mean by that is even if you do you have customer service excellence because it adds to your bottom line. Even if that is the driver, it's still better to do it that way from a human standpoint, to treat humans like humans who have bought your
mhm.
product, and it is to treat them as just a number on a spreadsheet.
Yeah, and I mean, we can think of many companies who, well, which don't care about their customers, or just focus on selling, and after they sell, they don't help you with the product or with the promised value. And well, the other thing which I wanted to ask you to talk about, just to let us know how things are going and how it started, is about your new business, Kosan Travel. So, how did that came into life?
Uh, the Kosan travel company, or just Kosan, we named it after Kosan Road in Bangkok, Thailand, which is a famous traveler street. And after Naked and after kind of doing the Wall Street thing and doing the Madison Avenue thing, and we knew we loved travel. We wanted to get back to it, and we wanted to create a company that helped us live that lifestyle, right? Live the traveler lifestyle, and something we wanted to do for 40, 50 years. Not build it to sell it. If that happens, sure, but that wasn't the intention. Build a business that I truly want to
Hmm.
take into my old age. So uh, that's why we started it from a personal standpoint, from a product market fit standpoint, from a market standpoint. We just looked at the market and said, "There's no travel clothing companies for millennials who are avid, voracious travelers." So there's a space in the market to become a challenger brand in, right? I mean, everything kind of existed in athleisure, in outdoor, um, and the market is that the consumer is that nuanced these days, that niche, right? Like I'll buy my hiking clothes. Those ain't my traveling clothes. Trust me, my yoga clothes ain't my traveling clothes.
Hmm.
We get specific, and there was nothing for that level of specificity. So we did it. We did $1 million Kickstarter. It suggested that there was product market fit, at least in the category of travel dresses that was our beachhead into the space. And so um, we had a really good start. COVID was very, very challenging for us. We are still
Hmm.
we are still climbing our way out of or back to normalcy, I will say. Um, there's a lot of, I think a lot of online businesses did pretty good. Travel clothing was not great, and I don't
Yeah.
think we made all the right decisions. I think we made decisions for the right reasons, but I don't think we made the right decisions in how we pivoted and adjusted. Like, for instance, we just paused the business for like 8 months at one point. We invested time and money in PPE, not a bad decision from a logical standpoint. The world needed PPE, we had access. But I think if I look back on it now, we probably would have fared better, or at least the same, if we just stayed with trying to sell travel apparel and not even really pivoting our messaging too much. So, you live and you learn. We're almost through the worst of the pain and
Yeah,
back.
well, that's great. And where do you see Kosan going in future years?
What I would love, what my dream is for this company is that we are a one-stop shop for everything you need for travel, but it is like just sustainable, high-end, ethically sourced, incredibly functional product where no matter where you're going in the world, let's say you're going to South Africa, let's say you're going to Thailand, we can actually create specific packing lists for where you're going and what you're doing in that country. It is that level of detail, so you can buy everything you need for a trip in one click. And that we at Kosan just travel all over the world with our customers as our sort of our functional goal of our mission as a company, delivering on a promise to our consumers. But beyond that, we believe that travel makes the world a better place. We believe that the more people who travel, the better off the world will be, and therefore we want to do everything we can to support travel and human rights causes so that we just become more and more one as a world, not more divided against ourselves and each other.
I really like that. And I right now my only two entrepreneurial projects are the podcast and the reader lounge. But in the future, I would like to have a company or something around traveling, or also around energy, around sustainable energy. And I sort of have many ideas which I hope like develop in the future years. And well, Joel, is there anything else you would like to add in general before wrapping up?
Oh man, it's been great. It's been
It
great
really
chatting
has
with you.
been.
You're a cool entrepreneur, and you're gonna make it. I know it. Well, you're making it. Like they
Thanks,
said,
Joel.
there's not a made it. There's only the journey, and so you're definitely on it, and it's awesome to see.
Thanks, Joel.